Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of A Coffee with Chris. I am so stoked to welcome onto the show today a man and a business that changed my life. His name is Gavin Drake. He's the managing director of Mindspan. They are a training and coaching company that has been at the forefront of mindset, attitude, and psychological development training for over 2 decades. They help organizations enhance their performance by demonstrating the fundamental link between psychology and success. And as always, this show is brought to you in association with our charity partner, 𝗖𝗵𝗄𝗵𝗀. Gavin, welcome to A Coffee with Chris. Let's kick off with the big question. Why do people need to take their psychology around social media seriously?
Well, probably just taking a step back from social media. Firstly, people need to take their psychology seriously, generally in day-to-day life, of which social media for many people is quite a big part these days, isn't it, Chris? Now, obviously, you and I met years ago, didn't we? Known each other for a long time. And obviously in those early times that we had interactions, I helped you understand that whole principle around why our psychology is hugely important. Briefly, for anyone watching or listening, why is our psychology important in life and with regard to social media? Essentially, this basic model expresses how we all function in day-to-day life. So it's a cycle. We call it like the thinking cycle. And we will share this with any client, one-to-one groups all over the world. If you imagine at the top of this big circle or cycle I'm going to take you through, we'll put the word thoughts. So, of course, wherever we are and whatever we're doing, we have stuff happening in our head. We are thinking about stuff. We can do that with the tiny conscious mind. You only really get one thing in there at a time. You've got a massive subconscious, which has got activity in the background. And we could also, and we're sort of programming our subconscious as we go through life. Then I'm sitting almost underneath all of that as an unconscious, which we could suggest has got a bit of programming in it that you're born with, a bit of genetic stuff. So conscious, subconscious, unconscious. But if I wrap all of that stuff up and just say that's the stuff that's going on in your head, we just call that thoughts, just for want of another term. Now, as we come around the cycle from the top to thoughts, and let's say go around to like 3 o'clock, if it's a clock face, what we're doing in our head at any one moment will create how we feel. So it creates a cocktail of emotions. So the way we are thinking about, or the perception we have of, or the meaning we're giving something, all that is how we think about stuff, will create how we feel about it. So thoughts, our psychology, creates our emotions. Our emotions, this little cocktail of feelings that we're experiencing, will drive our behavior, drives our actions, our decisions, our choices, our responses. And in a world we don't fully control, because absolutely we don't, people think they do, and most people are trying to control the world around them every day, which is where their stress and anxiety and anger comes from, really. So if we imagine our thoughts create our emotions, drive our behaviors, in a world we don't fully control, all of that massively impacts, if we go from 6 o'clock to 9 o'clock, how things turn out, our outcomes or our results. So I learned nearly 3 decades ago from lots of areas of psychology that there's a direct link between what we're doing in our head at any one moment, how we're thinking about stuff, our perception of stuff, and how our lives are turning out. So that generally applies to life. And that's why that's the fundamental basis of everything that we teach. So it's never what you're thinking about, which is the most important thing. It's always how you think about it. That's the big question we need to challenge ourselves with every day. If it's raining, how am I thinking about the rain? Because it'll drive whether I cause myself to be fed up or whether I quite like it. Does that make sense? People will be thinking about this conversation they're seeing on their screens. Now, it's not the fact you're thinking about it, it's how you're thinking about it that will drive whether you're enjoying it or whether you're not. If that makes sense. So when we apply that to social media, we live in a world where, let's be honest, through most age groups, most demographics, the digital space, the social media space has just grown and grown and grown and grown. The challenge we all see and we do a lot of work with young people in schools as well too, there seems to be increasing mental and emotional dysfunction in society generally, but also around social media. So is how we think about social media important? It's just fundamental. It's fundamental to our experience. It's fundamental to how we handle everything.
Gav, what an opener. What an opener. And even
downhill from there now, downhill.
Even if we just stop this conversation there, it would be such a valuable podcast episode for sure. I don't really know entirely, Gav, exactly where this conversation is going to end up, but essentially one of the things that's really bugging me is the world of social media is perceived as this dark, gloomy, doomy place, and everything's going wrong, and it's causing mental health issues, etc. And of course, it is. But that thinking cycle that you so eloquently explained there, Gav, I think could actually really empower people and businesses in terms of the way that they approach social media, not just for themselves personally, but also for their business in terms of how customers are perceiving their messaging, which is, of course, their emotions, and all of that stuff intertwined. So I think it's brilliant to open with that. Thank you. And linked to that, my next question for you, Gav, is you've almost teed up for me there. Social media is overwhelming, right? There's no doubt about it. It's ever changing. There's always new platforms popping up. There's always ways to improve, to get better, to get worse at them. There's no one size fits all solution about this. But my question to you, Gav, is how do you deal with that feeling of being overwhelmed by social media? What's sort of your go-to with that when you feel overwhelmed?
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that word, Chris, because a lot of the training that we're doing in the world at the minute, but I do increasing one-to-one work, coaching and stuff with people all over the world. And crikey, that word in the last handful of years, particularly from the COVID space, just comes up in conversation way more, just in life, just generally, the thing about overwhelm. So I have a lot of overwhelm conversations. So again, if I just put social media just slightly to one side and just talk about overwhelm, and I'll bring social media back into it. Overwhelm, generally speaking, if you look at overwhelm simply, overwhelm is when you, me, or anybody else perceives, because it is a perception, that we have something in front of us, or that we're dealing with something, or we have a task, or we've got a challenge to meet, or whatever, or a life to deal with, that's way bigger than us. That is going to demand more than I have. That needs more resource than I have available. That is very simply what overwhelm is. So I guess you can start to see that and understand that if you link that to the thinking cycle, it's only a perception. Because actually, if you thought about it differently, you wouldn't feel so overwhelmed by it. Does that make sense? Now, that's the reality of the psychological and emotional principle. But at the end of the day, when we are overwhelmed, you can't just say to someone, well, just don't be. You need to help them with it. And that might be, if life looks that big, or social media just looks this big at the minute, if you want to engage, either don't engage in it and think, well, it's too big and walk away. Or if you think, actually, no, it's important I engage because I've got a business I want to promote, or I'm trying to change the world with this principle, or help people, whatever our intention is. And I would like to talk about intentions on this conversation sometime today, because that's really important as well too. Then just break it down. Because what we're doing is we're looking at a whole load of different things. So it could be all the different platforms, and we're just looking at one as one. Oh, there's all these platforms. So no wonder it looks big, and no wonder you don't feel very resourced. Okay. Big picture is it is that big, but actually, what about if I just look at that bit first, get clarity, break it down, chunk it differently? All right, it looks a bit manageable. I can then sort out my courses of action, or my process about how I'm going to engage with this. So couple of things to bear in mind. Firstly, remember, it's just your perception. And secondly, whilst it is your perception, if you want to try and shift the feeling, break it down and chunk it differently.
I love that, Gav. So much gold in this. One of the things that I'm so happy that you mentioned there, Gav, is just taking it one platform at a time, rather than, just, I guess, opening that gate of overwhelm to, waterfall upon you, right? Which sounds fluffy, but I think it's truthful. And one of the things that we really pride ourselves at Brief Social Media is, when we onboard a client, we say, where are our quick wins? Where's the lowest hanging fruit? Which platforms do we need to take on as a phase one before we do phase 2, 3, 4, etc.? Let's just take it one platform at a time. And that's totally okay. Gav, you've mentioned their intentions, which could potentially come on to this next part of the conversation, because, of course, the flip side of this overwhelm, this unbearing sense of, not being able to keep up with the world of social media, either personally or in business. The other side is, if we actually mentally equip ourselves in the right way, of course, these platforms are insanely powerful, and we unlock so much opportunity. So I'd love to ask you, Gav, perhaps yourself or maybe your clients, what sort of mental tools should people be equipping when they're attacking the world of social media to perhaps build their brand or their business?
Well, I think quite often I hear people just say, like, if you're going to engage in social media, you just need to be resilient, for example. And yeah, that's true, but you can't just be resilient. If you're not resilient, I'll be resilient today. You can't just be it, because it's your thinking and psychology is behind whether you feel resilient or not. So while some of those things are useful hints, they are a bit throwaway in many respects. But I think personally, I don't engage in social media that much. The business does. I follow a few things. I've got a few hobbies, so I'm part of certain groups. I like my golf, so part of golf groups, and I like certain cars, so part of certain car groups. People with similar interests to me, because we share information and stuff, and obviously we do a bit of business stuff. But I think the whole point around how do we get ourselves in the place where we can sort of handle it, because it is quite a new beast, isn't it? It's not. I know it feels it's been around forever, but it hasn't actually. You don't have to go back that many years, and we didn't even have social media, did we? Really, even though some people have grown up with it. But I think there are certain hints I would encourage people with. Firstly, be really, really clear why you are engaging. So what's your intention? And we might have a variety of intentions based on different platforms, obviously. I think realize where some of our mental and emotional challenges come from. And they do come from us, ultimately. I know we can say it's social media, but it's, again, how we receive it and what we do with it. So if we have an intent, so just say, I don't know, someone's intention, whether they consciously realize it or not, is to be loved and liked by everybody. Mm-hmm. Okay, so if you're going to use social media for all of that, to get external validation, to get external approval, to get the likes, or whatever word we might want to use, it's not possible to enter social media asking for likes, wanting likes, and to only get likes. Mm-hmm. Because you cannot have likes without having some dislikes. Does that make sense? Because that's the way the whole thing works. So, of course, part of being resilient is to go in not wide-eyed, fully knowledgeable about what you are walking into. So do a bit of research. How does it work? What is your intention? And I think if we go in with a healthy intention, an intention that's healthy for you, if it is purely to get external approval, validation, you might get that from some people, but you're not going to get it from others. So you're going to feel great when you get it, which means the emotional contract is you're going to feel devastated when you don't. I think, and this is only my opinion, Chris, far too many people go to social media with that intention.
Yeah.
Consciously or otherwise. They're trying to, it's going to sound a bit cynical, they're trying to look good, trying to portray something which isn't really them, but trying to look successful or whatever it might be, because they want that external validation. It might be to promote themselves or whatever. So anyway, I think if we go in with that intention, you need to go in eyes wide open, because you're not always going to get what you're going in for. That's the deal. Fine. I'm not saying people shouldn't do that, but I think that's where it gets a little bit dangerous and problematic. If you want to engage in social media because you want to connect with certain groups that you like, or it could be around business, it could be around friendships, it could be around hobbies. If you want to connect because you are constructively trying to bring value to the world, that could be to tell people about your product or service or some amazing principles you want to share or whatever, then again, I think that's an incredibly healthy intention. But again, don't expect everyone to love. If you perceive something's valuable, so other people might not. But if you're not going on there to be liked, you're going to give value, just give value. And if someone doesn't like your value, you're probably not going to feel so emotionally hurt by that, because you weren't going on there to be liked anyway. Does that make sense?
It does.
So it's about, I think our intention is really important, because our intention will filter our responses. Does that make sense? It drives the interpretation of our responses. And I think, all right, if we want to, using social media, it is astonishing, Chris. It is absolutely astonishing that, we have with these platforms, and you can connect with people all over the world. You can share stuff. It's an amazing tool. And for me, that might sound controversial. There is nothing wrong with those platforms. They're awesome. Sometimes the way they're constructed is a bit manipulative, but that's a separate discussion, right? But if we're eyes wide open, we know that's helpful. So I think one of the things we need to take is a high level of consciousness about what we're doing. a lot of people engage in social media, and this is going to sound awful, isn't it? A bit in a trance state, just getting lost, going down holes. That was another hour of my life gone. Do you know what I mean? And so we need to take the tiny conscious mind into all of this. What's my real intention? Because that's not just important for the people I'm connecting with. That's important for me in terms of my interpretation of what comes back. I heavily encourage people not to go onto social media to get external validation and approval. If you want validation and approval, come and work with us, and we'll show you how to create that for yourself. Because then you go in the world not needing it from other people, or go to someone else. But we live in it's an evolving world, particularly with some young people. We're looking outside of ourselves so much for approval. No wonder we feel a bit flaky, not very resilient, because it's all our view of ourselves is totally based on external validation. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. It's very unhealthy. So I know I'm sort of meandering a little bit here, but there's a few things here around massive importance of your intention. Be far more conscious about all of your activity. And if I'm going to give the single biggest piece of advice I could probably give, because there's loads, go in with an intention that's healthy for you.
I'm so pleased, Gav, that you've said that word intention. I encourage all of our watchers and people listening back to this as well to really think about your intentions with each and every platform, and also each and every post as well. And I think that's a really good way of course, dealing with the responses, whether it's lovely responses or not so pleasant responses as well. And Gavin, that does lead me on to my next question, which is that, of course, it's spoken about all the time that with social media, people inevitably get nasty comments because they don't realize that they are signing an emotional contract. That was a good phrase that you used. How should we be thinking about the negative responses that we receive? And that might be, by the way, a customer service or maybe a marketing executive that's running the social channels. You receive a negative piece of feedback, a negative review, a critical response to a thought or opinion. How do we need to be thinking about that negativity in order to effectively deal with it?
Well, again, you'd expect me to say this. Who decides it's negative? Well, we do. It's just not what we want to read, or it's just not what I'd ideally want someone to say. So we put it in a bracket or a category then, don't we? Because you could get a piece of feedback which, let's say, like, it's quite critical or quite cutting. You could, I know you're not always going to get this, because sometimes you get just throwaway comments of people that like to sit on a keyboard. I know that. But you could look at that and think, I certainly don't like the way they've said it. What can I learn from this? What's in this for me? What's the gift in this rather harsh piece of communication? You could do that. Now, let's be honest, some stuff on social media probably doesn't deserve that level of attention. So I think, again, I go back to be really conscious about how you decide to think about what you get back on social media. And I'll give you this as a quick example, and it's not social media related, but it does link to what we're talking about. Some years ago, I used to know a guy who's a leadership trainer, consultant. He's probably the best leadership trainer I've ever met in my whole life. He's awesome. So he's like, for me, I think I'm pretty good at what I do, but he was, in leadership sense, he was like there. He'd sometimes call me on the way back from being somewhere in the country, and I'd be driving home from somewhere else doing my mental stuff. And I'd say, what sort of day have you had? And he'd go, yeah, I've had a pretty good day, really. He said, although there's something I want to talk to you about. And I go, what do you want to talk about? He said, well, I've been with a group of 15 people for 3 days, and I got some feedback at the end. And this one person said, right? I said, okay, all right. I say, well, what do you want to do with that then? Well, I think they've misunderstood this, and this. No. I said, well, yeah. So that's one person. He went, yeah. I said, what about the other 14 people you were with? He went, they thought it was brilliant. So I said, oh, okay. If you've asked for feedback, you probably need to respect what you get back because you've asked for it. That's the same principle on social media. If you put something out there, you're not putting it out there because you don't want anyone to read it or you don't want anyone to see it. That's not what you're doing, is it? So if you're going to put it out there, just be thoughtful and careful about how you handle what you get back. So I just said to, I used to say to him things like, well, okay, you might not have liked that piece of feedback. what you're going to do with that. And this is you know this, Chris, I've said this to you so many times. All right. So three things to do with a bit of feedback like that, or a difficult bit of feedback or response you might get on social media. Review it, do it consciously. Review, learn, let go. That's all you need to do. Review, learn, let go. Review, learn, let go. What most people do is read it, grab it, hang on to it, carry it with them tomorrow and the next day, ready to be joined by the next bit of horrible feedback they get on Friday. And they just gather it. And people start to mentally, emotionally carry it around with them. Just don't. Now, equally, you know, if people are telling you how great you are and how lovely you are and you do a great job, that's nice. That can help your self-belief and confidence. But again, review it, learn from it, let go of it. Treat it all the same.
How incredibly powerful, Gav. I love that sort of three-step process. And actually what you said there, that the stories reminded me, and I think so many people on social, particularly in business, that are growing brands online or running business social media accounts, is they don't realize that there is a whole bunch of silent majority, which is most of your audience, by the way. Engagement rates are actually getting less and less and less. People are more aware than ever before of leaving digital footprint. And you don't realize, as you say, that one negative comment, actually, there's about 500 other people that loved that post and agreed with it. They just didn't comment. I think so I think your three steps really good. And I also would encourage other people that are running social media accounts to also apply that filter too. Gav, there's so much goodness in this. I want to also ask you about, obviously social is ever changing. It's you know, it can be an intimidating place. What I want to ask you is actually, how can we get our mindset into a place of, I actually quite liked what you said earlier about wide-eyed. I quite like that. You didn't like it, I liked it, because people have got their blinkers on all the time of like, this is the only way we market our business and and of course with that only creates a certain amount of result. How can we get our brains into perhaps, you know, this latent potential mindset in understanding, you know, actually if we do try TikTok, for example, what opportunity is out there? Because I feel like maybe this is a bit of a selfish question, but for me, some of the conversations I have with prospects or clients, I would say, have you tried TikTok? And they'd say, oh no, that's just for kids, that is, or something like that, right? So how do you flip that mindset?
But how do we? That's just a high level throwaway common thing, isn't it? So that person said, well, it's just for kids, isn't it? Have they looked at TikTok? Have they studied TikTok? Have they researched the opportunities in TikTok? No. So it's another example, Chris, in our, I'm going to have a social comment here, in as much as so many people in society develop very strong opinions with hardly any information. And that some of that is fostered by social media. So I think for you in your profession is to sometimes challenge that. So if someone says that, you know, I don't mean challenge in an aggressive way. Say, what, you know, if they say, well, TikTok's just for kids, isn't it? What makes you say that? Just out of interest, what brings you to that opinion? For example, what research have you done that suggests that, or who have you heard that from, or whatever? So I think we need to just start to try and chip away at that, actually, because that's how you change opinion. You don't change opinion if someone says, well, it's just for kids, and we go, no, it isn't. That doesn't change opinion. Opinion gets changed when we chip away or undermine or argue the case for something different, someone's opinion. But I think that's a challenge we have in business and in life generally. Because again, as I said, society, lots of people, not everybody, lots of people in society seem to develop incredibly strong views and opinions with very little evidence and information. We can say that's a bit crazy, but that's what a lot of people do. And that's what we're confronted with sometimes in our businesses, et cetera, et cetera. So we don't have to be aggressive or annoying about it. But I do this even more. And I'm quite mature in years now. So whether it's driven by age, it's not just age, it's also driven by my learning continuously. And also the fact I coach and I train and I consult with the senior teams and other people all over the world. I don't just accept what people say anymore. I will often, if they make a claim, like I'll always usually follow up with a question around, oh, okay, what makes you say that? And often they will, well, I read it somewhere. Where was that? The Sun?
Yeah.
Where was that? Bob down the pub, he said it. Well, okay. Well, let's just examine that a bit more. So I think this goes right back to, though, Chris, this whole principle of talking around the social media piece of let's be more conscious. Let's think more consciously about a lot of this stuff. Let's not go through life in some sort of trance state, just having little whimsical things enter our head and then we allow them to run our lives. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense. It is a wish, which is a dangerous word to use. I wish that people were more wide-eyed, and I wish that they approach things in a manner of, well, actually, we should test this, we should try this, we should fail forwards. And I know that a couple of cliche things in that splurge there, Gav, but
sorry, Chris, you just prompted me, sorry. But that's, in our businesses, that's part of our responsibility, isn't to just deliver our services, is to educate people as to like why our services are so fundamental for them. Otherwise, we just expect everyone to go through life as, oh, they're a perfect social media client or they're a perfect Mindspan. No, they're not. We need to help them become one. If that makes sense. You know?
No, that's really good feedback, Gav. And I'm sure you've got so many of these stories, but I would really love to hear from you, Gav. We could do a round 2, 3, 4 of this conversation for sure.
Always welcome. Always happy to.
All sorts of rabbit holes, but I want to know from you, Gav, what are the most highly said things to you around social media? What are the top mistakes that people are making when it comes to their psychology on social media? Because Gav, you speak to people all around the world. You speak to people that are within businesses of all shapes and sizes. You speak to former and current professional athletes. Everyone has lots of challenges with this technology. So what are the top mistakes people are making from a psychological perspective when it comes to their social media?
Believing quite strong things, again, without much evidence or thought, because that, our key strong opinions and beliefs in life, which are all in here as part of our thinking, isn't it? They define us. They absolutely define us. So if I believe I can't do something, that defines me, because I'm probably not going to do it, am I? If I believe I can do it, does that mean I will? No, but I start to open up the possibility to. So you'll know this. We define a belief as something you accept as true or real. So I think you hear people's beliefs in their communication, don't you? Like, well, it's just social media is just so toxic, isn't it? Well, some bits are, but it's not really social media. It's the people. It's mostly people on social media, isn't it? That we could construe as being toxic, but then that's just our opinion. I think because of the way the platform has evolved, the human activity that's evolved on it, I think it is absolutely, we definitely need to be far more conscious about what we're doing and how we're using it. If I was a parent, well, I am a parent, but if my children were young, because mine are 33 and 30 now, my 2 children, Ollie and Em, I would be very thoughtful about how I managed as a parent social media and even devices with my children. I don't think I'd stop them having them. I don't think I'd try and ban it all, because that, it's like as a child, that makes something more attractive if you're not allowed it. So I try to teach my children to be more conscious, be eyes wide open with it. I'd be trying to teach them to build their own self-worth and esteem, so they don't need it on platforms, all those sorts of things. So I think there are obviously, it's still a fairly new thing, even though we think it's been around a long time. It's still fairly new. So you've got new generations coming through that it's been there since birth for them. You've got people like me where, I don't know, used to use an abacus, so then we had phones and they had no cameras on them and stuff like that. So it's all we have different experiences. We've lived with other stuff, but I think there are, if we think it's evil, that it's not. It can be an absolute force for good. So I think there's a lot of publicity around mental and emotional health issues, dysfunction around social media. So I think that's the space that gets filled a lot. So we're more aware of that. We talk about that a lot. We feed that a lot. And it is true, there is some of that, but it's not all of social media, is it? Because, I can remember not that long ago, with certain major events around the world, like in Manchester a few years ago, within minutes of, say, a bomb going off, there were people on social media saying, if you need a room for the night or a bedroom, let me know. You know, we come to people, each other's aid. You know, you can raise money for charities around social media. There's some people have a cry for help and they get it on social media. We can share interests, hobbies. There's all sorts of great stuff. What I would love to see, this is me, I'm going off on one now, Chris, so sorry.
That's good.
What I would love to see, and I had a huge part of my life without all of this, so I know what it was like before social media, BSM. I know what it was like then. We lived perfectly fine without it, so to speak. But it's an amazing tool that can be used in so many absolutely awesome ways. Let's approach it, all of us. Let's just gather ourselves together, get really conscious, and just use it and engage in it in really positive, constructive, awesome ways. Because you know, the whole AI piece is developing more and more and more. And obviously it's a part of that, isn't it? It's a part of all of that field. And AI, again, in and of itself is not an issue.
It's people.
It's people. So it's if we can approach AI, if we can approach the social media space, digital evolution, all this other technological advance, if we can approach all of that and plug into it incredibly positive, healthy intention, it will absolutely nourish the human race. Sorry, mate, I've got big there. If we don't, it'll do the opposite. But that's not about the platforms. It's about us.
Mic drop moment, Gav. It was brilliant, mate. I'm so grateful for your time. Thank you for imparting your wisdom upon this space and the audience watching and listening. And Gav, where can people find you? Where can people check out Mindspan?
The Mindspan website, which is mind-span.co.uk. Obviously, I spend a little bit of time around LinkedIn. If you want to particularly link with me and want any help or discuss anything, I'm always happy to help. You know that. We have a growing team all over the world. This is hot off the press. It's not happened yet. We've got this amazing opportunity in South America at the minute. You never know what's going to come, do you? We've got all sorts of things we're working on. Then suddenly we get this opportunity come like a curved wall of it. Really? So explore that. The Mindspan app, you know, my daughter M, she's massively putting loads of work and hours into that. So the Mindspan app is probably going to go to the App Store in about the next 4 weeks for approval. Wow. So people will be able to find that and engage in levels of that as well too. So yeah, there's loads of ways, Chris.
Amazing. And as I say, every time I speak to you online, publicly, to anyone, anywhere, please engage with Mindspan. It completely changed my life. I was on a downward trajectory, and as soon as I spoke to Gavin, as soon as I understood the Mindspan thought cycle and all sorts of things, life truly did hockey stick for me. So thank you again for your time, Gav. Thank you to everyone that's watching and listening to this back. As always, thank you to our charity partner, 𝗖𝗵𝗄𝗄, who are a local charity who help local people affected by cancer. I'll see you this time again next week. Thanks, everyone.